Today on Eye on Northwest Politics, fighting for Oregon.
We wouldn't have to fight Trump if he wasn't doing the things he was doing.
1 year into legal battles and after filing dozens of lawsuits against the administration, I sit down with Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield to talk victories and losses. Plus, start the clock. Lawmakers prepare for a short legislative session as Democrats make a move to bump an unpopular transportation bill to the May ballot. My guests are House Majority Leader Ben Bowman and Minority Leader Lucetta Elmer. Eye on Northwest Politics starts now. Thanks for joining us. This is Eye on Northwest Politics. I'm Ken Boddy. Let's get right to your top political headlines. A state representative who led the petition drive against Governor Tina Kotek's transportation bill is running to unseat her in November. Ed Deal announced his campaign on Wednesday. He says Oregon has lost sight of who it works for. Deal is an engineer and a business owner and was first elected to the House in 2023. Meanwhile, Oregon Democrats want to move up when voters can make a decision on that transportation bill. They now say they want to move it to the primary election in May instead of the midterm election in November. Democrats say the move to May shortens how long lawmakers must wait to get answers about transportation funding. Republican lawmaker and candidate for governor Christine Drazan calls the decision desperate and says Governor Kotek wants to avoid having the tax increases on the same ballot as her re-election. Multnomah County leaders are reevaluating the county's drug deflection program. They're considering changes to what it means to successfully engage in it. Currently, people who stay overnight in a shelter meet the requirement. Critics, including District Attorney Nathan Vasquez, says more accountability is needed. When it comes to suing the federal government, the state of Oregon is at the top of the list. Under Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield, the state has filed or joined in more than 50 lawsuits against the Trump administration on everything from tariffs to the withholding of federal grants to birthright citizenship and more. Just this week, Rayfield hosted a town hall in Portland with 4 other AGs from California, Hawaii, Maine, and Minnesota, one of several town halls across the state the AG has held since he took office a year ago. Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield was elected in 2024 after a stint as Speaker of the Oregon House of Representatives. AG Rayfield, welcome back to Eye on Northwest Politics.
Always enjoy being here.
Well, I mentioned the town hall this week with the other attorneys general. How much coordination is there among the states when it comes to these lawsuits against the administration?
Well, the coordination is incredibly important, and it's incredibly important in terms of a workload, right? The amount of things that we've been protecting, say here in Oregon, $4.6 billion, really takes all of us working together. Not one state could do it alone, but even more importantly, think about the individual cases we've been involved in. As the president tries to normalize the use of the military on our streets, that didn't start in Portland. That started in California, then it went to Washington, D.C., Tennessee, and then it went to us. And so we were able to have really important conversations through relationships we built to find the appropriate strategy for us to get the outcome that we really wanted as quickly as we could get it.
You've been aggressive against the Trump administration from the very beginning. Why is that?
Well, because the Trump administration has taken unlawful actions. It's pretty simple, right? I would love to be less busy. Boy, I would love to set up a hammock in my DOJ office and not have to file 53 lawsuits. But the reality is, Democratic attorneys general right now are the backstop in protecting the cornerstones of our democracy. And it's a very simple thing. When the president violates the law, when he violates the Constitution and does something that harms Oregonians, we have a responsibility to act. And it's the amazing staff and attorneys at the Oregon Department of Justice that really allow us to be so responsive in the moment.
One of the major victories for you was federal judge Karen Immergut's ruling against the administration deploying troops to Portland. Eventually, those troops were sent home. What was the winning argument there?
The winning argument were the facts. Right? You had a president of the United States looking at social media, trying to make conclusions about what was going on in the city of Portland. We knew that we needed to be in the courtroom as quickly as possible. And in the staff and the attorneys at Oregon Department of Justice, we were able to get in there in less than 24 hours. It was actually 12 hours when the ruling or when the order came down from the federal government. And the purpose of that is get in front of a judge, because the courts are about real facts on the ground, get real evidence in front of a judge to then show that that president did not meet the statutory requirements to be able to federalize the National Guard. And that's ultimately what the judge ruled under those circumstances.
You also sued the federal government over tariffs. You won in the U.S. Court of International Trade. Why challenge the president's tariff strategy?
I think this is one of the most important cases in our country. The president was trying to use an emergency power that no other president had ever used to implement tariffs. Now, if you're a small business, you know that you're the one paying the cost for those. And ultimately, you and I pay the cost of those tariffs. The president's own lawyers looked the Supreme Court in the eye, in the courtroom, and said 30 to 80% of those tariffs are paid by us. And that's why it's so darn important that we push back. And you could do tariffs, do them lawfully, but there's going to be sideboards, and you don't get to just pass those costs as a hidden tax on to Americans, especially at a time when the wealth gap in America is growing exponentially. And that's why it was so important for us to be a part of that. And I'm proud that Oregon, out of all the states, was leading that and arguing in the Supreme Court. So very important moment for this state and amazing people at the Oregon Department of Justice.
Can you claim any other victories among those lawsuits? And on the flip side, where have you been challenged? Where are you losing?
Yeah, I think those are really important questions for the American people and, frankly, Oregonians to really dig into. And I want more people to dig into this. What you're seeing right now is in almost the overwhelming majority of the cases where we have had to file a lawsuit, we are prevailing when we're seeking immediate relief, right? You think about the tariff case. We prevailed at the lower courts. We prevailed at the appellate court, and now we're in the Supreme Court. We're seeing cases right now. One that got a lot of news attention here in Oregon was the Victims of Crime Act money that the president withheld. That was a case where the federal government said, you know what, we're just going to wave the white flag and we're just going to get that money flowing again. SNAP benefits, another one. We here, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, nobody should go hungry in our state. This was a case, we filed it, and again, the federal government waved the white flag, money started flowing again, right? So these are the type of things that are going on. And of course, you're going to find some cases where you're being challenged, right? Procedurally, there have been some cases where we've lost. Procedurally, the underlying merits of the case are still moving forward. But, you know, of course, there are a couple procedural cases that we take disagreement with.
Give me an example of that.
Yeah, so one of those is what we call like nationwide injunctions, where we have, say, 23 states, and say a lower court might issue an injunction for all 50 states. So changes the legal strategy on how you pursue a case, but really ultimately what we want is relief for all Americans, relief for all Oregonians, but it really puts the onus on the Republican attorneys general, because when you aren't able to get that nationwide relief, you're going to have results in different states that are not the same. So it's going to create these political tensions, especially on really critical things like Victims of Crime Act dollars in some of these conservative states, who those attorneys general are then going to have to decide, do I want to buck the president? So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
The president has said that he wants to do away with vote by mail, which is how we voted in Oregon for about 3 decades now. This is how the president described vote by mail late last year.
Mail-in ballots are corrupt. Mail-in ballots, you can never have a real democracy with mail-in ballots.
Well, Secretary of State Tobias Reed, who oversees elections in the state of Oregon, has said that he defends our system, but he's preparing to deal with any disruptions. Do you expect to weigh in on the vote by mail dispute?
Well, I'll weigh in with you, Ken, and I'll weigh in with Oregonians. Vote by mail works. And it is proven to be effective. It's proven when we think about the history here in Oregon to be accurate, right, with paper ballots. Hands down, we've had a Republican Secretary of State, Dennis Richardson, who talked about the integrity of vote by mail. This is not a partisan issue. When people get in and they look under the hood, they really see that there is trust in the system. Now, that does not cause or put discount on the issue that we do have trust in our issues in our democracy right now. And I think we as elected officials have a responsibility to really show the American people, show Oregonians that our systems have integrity. And I think the Secretary of State is doing a wonderful job. We as attorneys general are being prepared and actually are having conversations for what could happen during this year. I think that is incredibly important for us, is that when we get to next November, that all Americans have trust in whatever the outcome is. And I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, we all agree that we want integrity in our elections, and that's what we have to work towards.
How much faith do you put in the federal courts or the Supreme Court, if it gets that far, to decide these cases?
You know, my belief and my hope is that when they look at the facts, they apply the law to the facts and they do it accurately. That's all we can ask any justice, is you do your best to remove any partisan leanings that you have, and you have a sterile application of the law to the facts. And that's what we're going to fight and work towards, and until we see otherwise, that's how I'm going to hope this continues to go forward. What I think people should recognize right now is we have judges appointed by Democrats, judges appointed by Republicans, giving very sterile analysis of the law, and frankly in ways that is causing the president to get incredibly upset. We've had Trump lawyers ruling with the state of Oregon. We've had multiple actual Trump lawyers ruling with the state of Oregon on a lot of these various lawsuits, whether it's in New York on our tariff case or whether it's here in Oregon under the National Guard case. That should give people a little bit of hope, because again, I think when you put that robe on and you step into a courtroom, your job is to divorce yourself from politics and look at the facts and apply the law. That, if it is a ruling that we don't like, if we don't think that that's good for the integrity of our democracy, then Congress needs to act. And Congress needs to step in and pass different laws that better reflect the values of Americans.
Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield, thanks for coming back to Eye on Northwest Politics.
Always good to see you.
From big budget gaps to preserving the state's infrastructure to immigration, Oregon legislators will tackle those issues and more during the short session that starts next week. We'll talk to Oregon House leaders, Democrat Ben Bowman and Republican Lucetta Elmer, about what to expect next on Eye on Northwest Politics.